to Australia, to the Australian contributors, and Kate, who's been organising the Australian contributions. And yes, this is New Zealand handing over to our big neighbour.
Thank you, Simone. Can I ask a very quick question again? I'm recording from this end as well, is that right?
Yes, if you can hit, just as a backup, if you hit the record to your computer on Zoom, that would be
wonderful.
That would be good as well. And yeah, hopefully I'll be able to drop into some of your sessions, but hope it all goes very well. Anyway, I'm sure it will. It looks some really interesting titles.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, well, it's 11 o'clock. I will begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which we meet today, and pay my respects to Indigenous elders past, present and emerging. Sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. It's my great honour to meet today with 3 sessions from Australia, with some leading colleagues really working in the intersections between evidence, assessment, recognition, what is recognised, how things are recognised, who recognises, some really big disruptive but innovative ways to think about what learning and teaching and assessment is in formal and informal places, and how in multiple sites we actually can come to know and then be recognised for that knowing in multiple ways. So I'm going to moderate this session, and then I'll have 2 further sessions later on today. And hopefully if you're here in our live streaming or you pick us up in a recording later, you can engage with us in Twitter and other ways through our community to actually have a bigger, broader discussion about this. I'm just going to ask Dan. Dan, do you want to share screen from your end?
Sure thing. Here we go.
Wonderful. So I will introduce myself first. I'm Kate Coleman. I've been in the open learning, open education, open badges space, including ePortfolios for some time. I'm really interested in thinking differently about ways that we come to know evidence and what evidence is in its multiple forms. And so I have the great pleasure of being a good friend, an ex-colleague of Dr. Patsie at the University of New South Wales. I'm now based at the University of Melbourne. I've worked with Pats for a long time, firstly in ePortfolios and coming to grips with how we might assess in different ways, and think about what assessment of learning actually might look like over time across the sciences. I'm going to hand over to Dan so that he can introduce his panel today that includes Dr. Doris, Zahner, which I'm probably terribly mispronounced.
No, that was correct.
Awesome. Managing Director of Edalex. So Dan, I'll hand over to you.
Fantastic. Right, I'm very excited to be here with everyone today, and we've decided to tackle just a tiny subject. So, and we have all the answers. Actually, we don't, but we do want to have a great discussion with the panel members, and then hopefully get any comments from the audience and participants as well. But yes, introductions. Professor Patsie is a senior fellow of the Higher Education Academy UK, UNSW Scientia Education Fellow, education-focused academic champion, and professor in pathology within the School of Medical Sciences at UNSW Medicine within UNSW Sydney. Patsie is recognized nationally and internationally as a scholar and an invited international AAEEBL board member and chair of the AAEEBL ePortfolio Research Special Interest Group. And Patsie infuses her extensive medical research and experience into educational practice by strategically integrating innovative adaptive lessons, ePortfolio pedagogy, and collaborative communities of practice for students to learn career-relevant professional skills. Patsie leads BadgeCop, which we'll be hearing a lot more about, a community of practice focused on micro-credentialing at UNSW. And I've had the pleasure of working with Patsie for several years in respect to the Badge Cop project. And I also want to introduce Doris Zahner. Dr. Doris Zahner is the Chief Academic Officer at CAE, a nonprofit organization specializing in performance-based assessments that authentically measure student strengths and opportunities for improvement in the essential career readiness skills most in demand in higher education institutions and employers: critical thinking, problem solving, and written communication. Dr. Zahner oversees all research studies pertaining to CAE's assessments and provides scientific oversight of scoring, equating, and reporting. She holds a PhD in cognitive psychology and an MS in applied statistics from Teachers College, Columbia University. In addition to her many responsibilities at CAE, Dr. Zahner is an adjunct associate professor at Barnard College and Teachers College, Columbia University, as well as New York University, where she teaches statistics courses to undergraduate and graduate students in the social sciences and public policy. I'll introduce myself, and mine is a much shorter bio. I'm the manager, but still thrilled to be on this panel. I'm the managing director of Edalex. I have more than 20 years of experience in EdTech, having worked for multinationals such as Blackboard and Pearson in the USA, the Netherlands, and here in Australia, before I founded Edalex in 2016. At Edalex, we developed Credentialate, the world's first credential evidence platform, as well as the open digital repository. And on a personal note, my interest in badging and meaningful micro-credentials potentially may have started way back in the 80s with Boy Scouts badges, but I'll never confess to my age.
Fantastic, thank you. Welcome.
Yeah. So, yeah, do you want me to just talk about the late breaking survey?
Please,
or did you...
please.
Okay, great. Well, in a survey that was just released overnight, no doubt just in time for our session today, there's a really fascinating study coming out of Strata Education and looking at the impact of COVID, on the challenges that students are facing. And given our time is brief, I want to explore these much in detail, but just to say that the chasm that already existed between for learners between education and employment has only widened with the impact of COVID, and you can see here some of the daunting statistics and challenges and perceptions that those learners are facing. Another point made in that was illuminated in that survey is the importance of the support that learners are receiving and to helping connect their education across to their career, which then leads into some other fantastic research that the Foundation for Young Australians has done, where they followed more than 14,000 learners across a decade, and they identified 4 key factors that can accelerate the transition to full-time work. And some of these not surprising, but what surprised me, and I do recommend you take a look at this research, is that building enterprise skills in education was the acceleration factor equals the 5,000 hours paid relevant employment plus relevant employment in one of those relevant career related cluster of jobs, and is really almost equal to the sum of the other 3 factors. So again, with all the challenges and perception of lack of value in traditional degrees, it's still the #1 accelerating factor. So just building on that, I might actually turn to you, Patsie, and just if you can just set the stage on the Badge Cop project and your research there at UNSW.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for handing over, and thanks, Dan and Kate, for the lovely introduction, and to the ePIC Organising Committee for having us here today. And I'm standing on Gadigal country, and they are the traditional owners of the land in which I'm working and standing on today. So I acknowledge these people. I'd also like to start off by talking about Badge Cop. Badge Cop really came together with a group of like-minded individuals at the University of New South Wales, faculty members who were really interested in visualising the skill set that really underpins graduate attributes at the University of New South Wales. So we tend to call these skill sets professional skills, and they are things, of course, like teamwork, communication in the written and oral form, but also other things like critical thinking and so on. So colleagues across the university in various faculties, engineering, sciences, art and design, so across the faculties in terms of representation, were interested in how we can visualize these skills. So we devised a method of actually using rubrics to evaluate how these skills are formed as part of our tasks that we design and implement as part of coursework. So these tasks are authentic to discipline, and they're very important for experiential learning. So when we design these tasks, we have the idea that we're building capacity in our students, and these enterprise skills that Dan just presented are the skills that we're talking about, skills that can be translated into other coursework, skills that can be translated into internships and beyond into the workplace. So that was the driver for getting us together, and we devised a system of how to capture those skill sets using rubrics.
Awesome. So Doris, how are you related into this connection around assessing workplace skills?
So all the way on the other side of the world,
Yeah.
We are a nonprofit, as Dan said, and we have had an assessment of critical thinking, problem solving, and written communication skills since 2002 in a performance-based paradigm. So that means not a multiple choice test. The students actually have to demonstrate skills in these areas and create a cohesive argument for a problem that they're given that represents some kind of real world. We try to make the scenarios for them as authentic as possible. So for college students, we often put them in the position of being an intern or working in their first job after they've graduated from university, or work for a class that they would have to put together a final report, as an example. And they're presented with a problem. Everything in these assessments are domain agnostic. So we are looking at these skills holistically and not measuring students' content knowledge. You don't have to have knowledge of specific science, math, humanities topics in order to do well, because everything is presented to the students within the document library for a particular problem. And we make them engaging for students so that they feel like the thing that they're doing in this task is meaningful for them. And then the results that they get on the back end is how we became connected with Dan and his team. We award badges for performance based on a standard setting study where we establish levels of mastery. So if students are proficient, accomplished, or advanced, they earn a badge. But up until now, it's never been a digital badge. It's just kind of been like a virtual sticker that they can use. We never really had the technology for it. And so because we know that these are the skills that are essential for success, whether it's at university or beyond in the workplace, the research that I've conducted in the past has looked at both predictive validity of their students' scores on these assessments, in how well it predicts their senior year or exiting year grade point average, as well as post-university outcomes as measured by employment, full-time employment, salary, and or graduate school program admissions. And so we've always known that these are important skills, but we've never been able to formally show that this is a way that validated their skills. And that's where Dan came in. So we've been talking with them. We have an MOU in place. We will intend to have digital badges that are verified. So the employers, when they actually see that the students have these skills, because transcripts from university, at least in the United States context, and I think this is true globally, they don't convey these higher order skills like critical thinking and problem solving. people have their content knowledge displayed on these transcripts, but when you hire somebody out of university, you don't know what their critical thinking skills are or their written communication skills, other than asking them for writing samples. But in those cases, you don't know if it's an authentic example of students writing. They could have gotten help. So these badges will offer a verified way of saying that this is a merit badge, right? So you have mastery of these skills, or you're proficient, etc.
Awesome. And I'm going to ask Dan to jump in, because Doris has just spoken your name a couple of times. It'd be really interesting to hear from your perspective on that, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and look, yeah, and just setting the context a little bit more around Credentialate, we had the great privilege of working with Patsie and her team as design partners to really inform the design and shape and capabilities of Credentialate. And Credentialate itself is not a badge agent or a badge issuer. I see Nate Otto from Badger in the audience, but we actually sit on top of that and leverage those existing platforms to really bring that evidence layer and surface that evidence on a personalized basis. So being able to present both quantitative and qualitative data that has been based on assessments from institutions, from organizations like CIE. So having that verified data to ultimately help bring meaning to that micro-credential. So that's really the space that we play in, and I'd say that the partnerships with both UNSW and with CAE and others are quite natural, so that we are not assessment experts, we are not education experts, but we're providing the platform that enables that flow of information, and ultimately it's then about giving the learner a voice and the ability for them to articulate what those skills, what those really workplace relevant skills are. That they possessed.
It's wonderful, and what an amazing partnership. I think that that this kind of connection is the way to actually make a move in any kind of disruptive space like this. So Patsie, in terms of the kinds of skills and graduate attributes, and you thinking about workplace skills, then how are you tracking and assessing those? What is it that you're doing specifically?
Okay, so Kate, I'll just use teamwork skills as the example. We used a whole lot of different skill sets that various faculty members were interested, like in, for example, creative thinking. But teamwork skills has been of interest across the university for a while. So what we've done is, look, a lot of our assessment tasks measure teamwork skills, but somehow it's buried within a marking criteria set or a rubric. So what we did is we expanded on that marking set, and we adapted an AAC&U rubric on teamwork and adapted that for our own context and applied that to our assessment tasks that were really based on experiential learning and authentic to discipline. So the team adjudicated on that rubric, decided that was appropriate, and we applied it and evaluated our students. So we were able to capture that quantitative and qualitative data that Dan mentioned. And the data piece has been the bit that's missing behind the badge in our mind. So when you have evidence that students and faculty can talk to, it's very powerful. So the badge becomes a vessel, a container of information that is very transportable across context. So we can measure from years 1, 2, 3 into 4 and beyond, out into the workplace even. So once that vessel is transported out, it is then built upon and developed further. And that's also the lifelong aspect to this.
It actually becomes a piece of data in its own right. And continues to kind of collect and transform and regenerate in other places.
Correct.
Yeah, great.
And what I've just pulled up on the screen is an example based on the UNSW rubric that you were just referencing, Patsie. And in this example, Samantha is able to share her, not only that she received a micro-credential in badging, in teamwork, but these more elemental skills and fundamental skills that underlie that capability. So this then is Samantha's story, being able to highlight her strengths around negotiation, as it so happens. Whereas if we look at another recipient who may have received a lower tier, then Lucy, in this case, is able to share her strengths, her abilities, and where there may be areas for further development to help come up with that development plan and really be able to speak in the language that employers are seeking.
So Kate and Dan, if I may add, the rubrics are very important because, as Dan has showed, it's got the qualitative information that then can link back to a quantitative figure if we decide to apply that. Okay, in terms of levels of attainment, for example. So they're very rich sources of information.
Yeah, it's actually a really beautiful identity piece. So what you're actually doing there is providing agency and autonomy to students to actually be able to show, but be recognized, but also show that recognition to other people. Is there a particular way that you can see this continuing to develop? I'm just
Dan?
really interested in
Yes.
what it looks like next. You know, like
Yes.
this is quite an amazing piece of work.
Great, yeah, thank you. And again, certainly a collaborative development. Well, so we have a few things on a roadmap. Next, what we're working on now is a concept of synthetic rubrics, and to recognize that rubrics are fantastic tools in terms of providing that consistency and data from a quantitative and qualitative perspective, but not everyone uses them. So really to look at how can we synthesize or create rubrics out of other items within a gradebook, or even pull in data from multiple subjects or courses, or ultimately multiple data feeds. So pull some from a learning management system, pull others from an assessment, pull other data from a work integrated learning platform, so to really enable the organizations to assemble that meaningful quantitative and qualitative evidence. And then so that's tomorrow. Next week, the day after tomorrow, in our big plans are really the concept of a skills passport, so that as each of us journey through our career, that we have formal and informal learning, we have formal and work practice, as well as organizations and many other activities. And so how can we work with other organizations to build that concept of a skills passport, and ultimately provide people with this sense of transferable skills that they carry throughout their lifetime. And to that end, we've joined the Open Skills Network, because we recognize something like that is much, much larger than just Credentialate or Edalex. And that is truly a global initiative, and other organizations like Concentric Sky and MC and many, many others are contributing to that. So yeah, we look forward to hopefully helping make a meaningful contribution in that regard as well.
Great, thank you.
And
so sorry, Doris, you go.
I was just going to say, and this is what was missing for CAE, and we're seeing this in a much larger context, rather than just having this be domestic within the United States. We have clients internationally. Most recently, we finished a project with the Ministry of Education and Culture with Finland, and they're very interested in badging because they want to know everyone knows how well they do on PISA, which is the 15-year-olds, but they don't know how their higher education students do. So they want to be able to badge and give credentials for their students coming out of higher education institutions. And this is the perfect way to do it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you a question about how CAE's relationship to evidence is, but you were just touching on it there.
Yeah, and everything that we have is rubric based, and so the badges that are coming out of Credentialate for the CLA Plus, which is our assessment, will be based upon the rubric, and also hopefully have information on how students can improve. So showing their strengths, but also identifying areas of improvement. And if a student, for example, is being assessed as they enter university and then throughout their career and tenure during university, their skills, you would imagine, would improve And you could see this growth that they would have in terms of their learning gains over time.
Fantastic. Did you want to add anything into that, Patsie?
That's super important, because the awareness building is, I think, the other piece that's missing. We've always been somehow building skills into coursework and into our students as they develop through the courses and learn. But the awareness of how that happens and how to talk about it has been missing. So with something like the Credentialate platform actually allowing visualization of a badge that is informed by data, students have a conversation piece, and that is transferable, not only throughout their university degree program, but beyond. So when you go out into the workplace and you're a student being interviewed for the first time, it's more than just saying, I can work as a team. You're now saying, I have negotiation skills, I'm adaptable. These are the criteria I was evaluated on. It's been warranted, it's been verified. I'm ready to work in a workplace according to the criteria that have been presented in a job application, for example. So they've got that piece of, that conversation piece. I think that's very important.
That's very true, Patsie. When you look at job descriptions, you typically don't see, can you do differential equations, right? It's having skills that are these higher order skills that they want. Those are part of the job description. And now this is a way to showcase your skills.
Yeah,
so you could,
they're probably the skills that have got students through this moment in time. They're not those disciplines.
Absolutely.
They're actually self-efficacy and these kinds of abilities to work in teams, to collaborate, to shift and to deal with that pivot.
I think it would be fair to say it's gotten us through this time where we've worked on our communication skills and teamwork and having to come together under duress and reimagine who we are. So our students have been watching that, and then we're modeling that for them now, and they're saying, okay, this is how it works, right? So how are you meant to speak in an interview when you don't really fully comprehend those criteria that are in a job application? Right? It makes it very tricky, right? So bridging the gap is super important.
And when COVID, is forecast to cause the loss of nearly 200 million jobs around the world, how then are these new graduates supposed to compete and differentiate themselves? And it is only through those skills and giving them that voice and ultimately helping support that optimistic mindset, coming back to that Foundations for Young Australian Research, so that they can come across positively and enthusiastically and knowledgeably, as you said, Patsie, when they don't have that work experience yet.
We have colleagues at CAE that we hired since COVID that we've never met in person before. Because of, especially based in the US, where it's basically a nightmare over here. And particularly being in the New York area. So it's been very interesting.
Absolutely.
Amazing. So in terms of CAE and assessment, has that shifted during COVID, Doris?
Yeah, we had to adapt. We used to use in-person proctoring at the university in a computer lab, and we had to change to Zoom or WebEx, whatever the university chose, in order to have virtual proctoring. And we had to pivot very quickly because CAE was definitely affected by COVID like everybody else.
So shifts in technology are going to just further, continue to change your kinds of practice. For all three of you, are there some ideas around these advances in technology that you'd like to comment on?
I think for us at CAE, the ability to give students instantaneous or very quick turnaround feedback. We're relying on AI for automated scoring, for the essays, as well as badging and these credentials, as we're working with Dan and Edalex for it. So these are things that we see for the future for us.
I think the integration of technology as part of the learning journey is very important, and that's what we really found to be the most impressive and exciting thing about this COVID shift in our classrooms. So students are now able to access all sorts of things in a really educative manner, rather than just quickly downloading and see what I've got, rather than thinking about how I can use this to benefit my learning.
And then from our side, yeah, echoing both Patsie and what Patsie and Doris have said, we're very excited about the potential with a supervised AI to help unlock so much of this data. Right? So much assessment is already happening, but it's being locked away inside of an LMS or locked away inside of a third-party assessment platform. So how can we surface that in a meaningful way and streamline this process for the insights for the academics, for the institutions, as well as for the learners? So it's there. Let's try to unlock it.
Can I also add, it's important to unlock, but it's important to teach how it can be used and where it's placed. So the curation piece that Kate and I have talked about for a long time is very important in terms of driving that learning journey, in terms of where data sits and why it's useful.
Good point.
So in terms of a way to kind of wrap up your session, I thought it would be really interesting to hear from the three of you around, I guess what your kind of headline or summary is in coming out in this presentation, because it's really exciting, innovative work. Is there something that you really want to land for people that are listening or in the live stream or in the audience today, that you want to be able to really kind of let them leave as a tight summary from each of you? If I start with you, Doris.
Sure. I think what is important for CAE and for myself is that people are aware of these university and career skills like critical thinking and problem solving and written communication. And students should be able to demonstrate these skills in a way that showcases them for them to be able to find employment or graduate school or whatever they choose to do after university.
Patsie?
Okay, so I think that a badge or a symbol of learning professional skills is really accessory to and integrated with the traditional academic transcript. So it's a package. It is not a separate vessel of information. One informs the other, and it should be viewed that way. And it should be verified, warranted, and transferable.
Wonderful, thank you. Dan?
Perfect. And I would just say it's all about putting the learner at the center. So we have these fantastic educational institutions and resources and systems and accrediting bodies and assessment organizations. But ultimately, yeah, what can we do to empower the learner, give them the knowledge of and help them learn their voice, so that they can articulate that, not just in finding their first job, or first full-time role, but really throughout their career, and think about those skills and lifelong learning and how to best put them to use.
Amazing, thank you. Are there any questions either in the audience that you want to ask live? We've got a small team, so we could do that, or to put it in the chat. Andrew, hello.
Kia ora, everyone. Kia ora, Dan. Good to see you again.
Yes, pleasure.
A lot of the work that has been discussed today is similar to some of the stuff we've been playing with in New Zealand around assessment of capability, as we call it. But I'm keen to sort of see what thoughts the panel had around the evidence that, or the material that a learner may have that sits outside of the formal academic realm, that is still rich and representative of skill or capability, and how that can be effectively woven into this very academic assessment process that we've all sort of been working with. And I'm keen to see what the thoughts of the panel are around how you address that.
Can I start by saying Eportfolio? our almost second, if not equal first favourite thing. The ePortfolio is very important for demonstrating both professional and personal development. So all the external things that people do are and should be integrated within that story. It's a narrative. One informs the other. It's just a bigger ecosystem of skills being developed. So it's very important to have an experience in a workplace that sits outside your formal learning to come back in and inform what you're doing in a teamwork assessment task, for example.
And from my perspective, because the transcript, the university transcripts gives you the academic information, but you don't see these higher order skills like critical thinking and problem solving. And so what an assessment and a credential badge would provide is this information of what do you know outside of math, science, literature, etc. Can you problem solve? Can you figure out can you find a solution for an issue that you're presented with, and then effectively communicate your solution to an audience, whether it's your manager or a professor or a larger audience, etc.
And then I'll jump in with a two-parted answer. First, RPL, recognition of prior learning, is something that's obviously been used for quite a number of years. So I think that's, those artifacts help build that. And I know there are a number of organizations that are providing those RPL services to review those resources. So I think that's one aspect where that RPL can then be reflected in a micro-credential or a badge. But then from the portfolio or ePortfolio perspective, I think there's a time and a place for the actual artifacts themselves, as well as for synthesized or assessment of said artifacts. So there may be different people or different times where someone will want to have that higher level assessment versus wanting to do a deep dive. So having that dual strategy and having those those pieces of evidence available in things such as an ePortfolio can be very helpful as well.
Great question and answers. Thank you. We've hit our time, but I just want to see if there's any other questions and any other discussion that you want to happen. I don't need to run yet. Some of you might need to, so I want to do a very big thank you. I'm very much looking forward to seeing this wonderful little presentation hit the world so that we can continue to broaden the discussion around this chasm between education and employment that I think seems to have broadened even further because of COVID. I think, we're actually at a really exciting point where we might actually be able to see a paradigm shift.
I hope so. And yes, and thanks definitely, Kate, for moderating, but huge thanks to both Patsie and Doris, especially Doris, and you're giving up your part of your evening in New York City. So thank you for that. Much appreciated. And
it's really been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate the perspectives.